Raymond, my favorite pro wrestling event in the world just happened this weekend, and that was the Royal Rumble.
Love the
WWE.
Royal Rumble.
Oh, it's the best. It's the best. It's right up there. I literally put it up there with the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals, and the World Series as just one of my all-time favorite events that happens every year, favorite sporting events. Now, Raymond, this made me think, because today we're doing an all Warriors episode. If the NBA, let's say the NBA did a Royal Rumble every year, the exact same rules. Every 90 seconds, a new NBA player comes out and enters the ring, and the only way that you get out is if another NBA player throws you over the top rope and your 2 feet touch on the ground. This made me think, Raymond, if the NBA did this every year, which they should do this just for fun, why not?
I would watch it, and someone's throwing basketballs into the ring that they can grab and throw at each other like dodgeball.
Like Todd, hey, I would love to see someone get hit in the head with the basketball, fall over the top rope, and hit the ground. That would be the greatest. Raymond, if they did this, do you think Steph Curry would ever be able to win a single NBA Royal Rumble?
Absolutely. If Ric Flair could win at number 3, not being the biggest, wrestler in that matchup, then Curry could absolutely do it. Especially if you throw basketballs in the ring. You're gonna give basketballs to the greatest shooter in the world in that range, in that small range.
He's just throwing basketballs.
Yeah, he's just throwing basketballs at everybody. Headshot, left and right.
You're probably right. Especially you just threw this caveat into the basketball. That's pretty good. Here's a question: how many NBA Royal Rumbles would LeBron James win?
Absolutely, precisely 0. Because who gives a shit?
This is the Gold Cast.
Boom! Welcome to another edition of the Gold Cast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy3 and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Salisa first, baby.
And the return of our esteemed third co-host,
Candlestick Will.
Boom! He's back. We have been teasing his return for weeks, and now he is finally here. And of course, if our boy Candlestick Will is here, you know that we're here to talk about one thing, and that is the Golden State Warriors. This is our first full Golden State Warriors only episode of the new year. This is very exciting. We have been kind of doing it as a second segment all year long, but now this is the first one. Perfect time. February is here. This is going to be our quarter season review of the Warriors. So let's just take a quick snapshot of where the Warriors are at right now, guys. Right now, the Warriors are sitting at 11-9. They are 7th in the West, and I'll tell you who's in front of them right now. In the standings right now, we have got right here. We got the Clippers sitting at 16-5, the Jazz 15-5, the Lakers 16-6, the Grizzlies 9-6, the Nuggets 12-8, the Suns 11-8. Then come the Warriors, and then right behind them are the Trail Blazers at 10-9. So overall, while maybe not the Warriors that we are used to out of the dynasty run, this is still a pretty feisty team. And Candlestick Will, I've been saying on the episodes recently, they kind of remind me of last year's Giants, where they are scrappy, they're doing better than people will expect. They still win they win some games they're not supposed to win. They lose some games they're supposed to win, but they're kind of like this kind of middle of the road, scrappy little defensive team. And so I'm dying to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts now that we're basically at the quarter season mark for the Warriors?
Well, we really only have like 3 great teams in the West right now. We have the Clippers, we have the Lakers, and we have the Jazz. The Nuggets have lost a lot of games this year, but they're also playing really good right now. So you could make the case that those 4 teams are far and away the best 4 in the West. And there's no other team in the West that's for sure better than the Warriors. Now, the Suns just the other day beat the Warriors without Devin Booker in a pretty impressive win. So that would suggest that right now the Suns are better too. But we also have had some pretty impressive wins, even though we were down by a lot of points to both the Lakers and Clippers. We've won the games we're supposed to win. We've only had one loss against a team with a losing record, and that was the Knicks game. And then even with that, we've had a couple of bad losses. The Denver loss actually was a bad one. They were not playing very well, and we had a big lead. So that's the kind of game that a good Warriors team would have easily finished. And a team that's middle of the road ends up losing a game like that. And if you look at some of the games we've won, like the Lakers and Clippers, those games should have been losses. So as much as we're just above 500, if we don't get a game winner against Detroit, that Damian Lee hits a three, I mean, that's not something you'd necessarily expect. We barely beat the Toronto Raptors, who are having a really tough season. So there's a lot of games that could have gone the other way. So as much as we want to maybe talk about some of their best wins, some of their barely wins and some of their bad losses, I think also can show us that this team is not as good as we maybe hoped they were. They're not as bad as they could be. And so, again, we don't know how to necessarily grade them yet, I think, because there's too many red flags on both sides. But I think in a real simple fashion, we got A+ so far from Steph Curry. Easily having an MVP type season. Might not win the MVP, but he's absolutely in the discussion. Andrew Wiggins has played completely over his head. He's having the best year of his career. Defensively, he's never looked like this before. He's actually playing better offensively than he's ever played in his career. He's only 24, which means this actually could be him just becoming a better player simply, first and foremost. Also, the pressure of not having to be the guy, because from the day one he was in Minnesota, he was always expected to be the number one. And most guys aren't good at that. Even Kevin Durant didn't like that at times. So even the greatest players in the world struggle with that. So the pressure of not having to be the main guy sometimes can be a huge weight off someone's shoulders. And it seems like that's what's happened with Wiggins. There's not a single other player who's having a great season. And so that's where the inconsistency comes. And we can go into more detail about some of the other players. But to me, you have a team that's just no longer top heavy. And it's Steph, Andrew Wiggins, and everybody else. And we can talk more about the other players in this podcast, but those two guys are clearly playing above their heads, although Steph maybe isn't even actually. That's how good he is. But those two are the only ones that are bringing it consistently, and that's why their record is what it is.
Absolutely. You brought up some really great points, and that kind of leads me over to you, Raymond. What do you think about the Warriors, where they stand right now? We obviously have Wiggins, and the crew is led by Wiggins and Curry. Absolutely, no question about that. But where do you see, Raymond, the rest of the team fall? What do you like? Who do you think is stepping up? Who do you think maybe needs to move a little bit further? What's your feeling at this quarter point in the season?
I've actually been pleasantly surprised because I came into this season with pretty low expectations. I think a lot of people did. I think the Warriors, for the most part, have seemed to have gotten past the ugly play of the first two blowouts in the beginning of the season. They've certainly not played that, but I mean, they've had one other game where they got blew out, the last lost against the Phoenix Suns. But outside of those three games, they've really been in most of these contests, and they've had leads like Candlestick Will, like you pointed out. They've had leads, they've lost leads, they've been behind, have come back. So they've kind of been running the gamut of every single aspect of type of game that they can be in. They've gotten blown out. They've also blown others out. They've come from behind. They've also given up leads. So they've been tasting the floor in every single aspect. And so to me, it's just a matter of time if they can kind of bring it together and gel. But I'm the eternal optimist, so I'm kind of leaning towards the positive things I'm seeing right now, which is leading to them being a couple games over 500 and a chance to continue that with their next contests against the Celtics, which obviously is not going to be an easy game by any stretch, but I think they're more than capable of winning that game. The Celtics are not the powerhouse they have been in the recent years, but their X factor is in their coach, Brad Stevens. He's an excellent coach no matter what type of talent is running through that team. He seems to be able to bring them together into making them a competent basketball team. So it's not going to be an easy game. But I think that, to me, the biggest surprise is, I have to say, James Wiseman. I think that he's just excelled. For him being 19 years old, basically not playing any NCAA basketball, and for him to come out of the gate and play that well, in a center position and play defense and, get boards and score. That's a pleasant surprise. That's huge. That's a huge leg up for the Warriors. Oubre had a really tough start, but he's finally come on and he's now playing more consistent two-way basketball. That's been nice to see. And Wiggins has been two-way basketball since game one. So that's been great to see. I think he scored 15 points or more ever since after the 2 blowout wins. So he's been dynamite consistent, and that's fantastic. And Candlestick Will, I agree with you. I think the fact that he's not the guy has just taken the pressure off of him, and he's just having fun now. He's playing more basketball. A lot of his defensive efforts come after he's already been beaten on a break, and so he's coming from behind and getting a lot of blocks that way, which is nice. He's got great speed. He's young. He's still very athletic. And he's playing two-way ball, which is what you want. Oubre's been playing better two-way ball. Wiggins has been consistent two-way ball. And Steph Curry's been Steph Curry. So I think if the rest of the pieces, can come together, I think Draymond should probably bear some weight and put some more pressure on himself to put more points on the board in addition to his defense to kind of help alleviate the second unit and some of the other guys. But I definitely see this team being a team that is going to have to learn how to hone on into their defensive skills if they want a shot. But I mean, so far, they're technically, statistically, they're in the running right now, but it's too early to tell. But so far, it's been a pretty fun season.
I completely agree. It has been a very, very fun season. We've been encouraging people all year long on the Goldcast to tune into these Warriors because they're not your daddy's Warriors, but they are pretty good. Raymond, you brought up Wiseman and Candlestick Will. I'm dying to hear your opinion. What are your thoughts have been on Wiseman's season so far?
I think it's exactly what you would hope from a number 2 pick and from a 19-year-old. I think to expect more is just our instant gratification universe we live in, that we expect guys to just step up and play well. I think he's been phenomenal for what he is, which is a 19-year-old, freak of nature athletically in some ways, not at all very athletic in other ways. He's not a very great jumper as much as he can get up. It's mostly just because of his literal size. He doesn't have like quick feet where he can, do things quickly, but he's also only 19, so some of that can improve with time. But, the way he can score from different places, his shot's not great, but he's willing to take a shot, which sometimes that's a huge thing because that's an easy way to improve it is when you're constantly working on it. We've seen with someone like Draymond, who was a better shooter, earlier in his career and has really not become a shooter at all anymore. Most of that's because he just stopped putting the time in, putting the effort in to be the shooter that he could be. If Wiseman puts in the work, it can be really effective to have a guy like him be able to stretch the floor. Marquise Chris being out the year hurts because that's something that he was able to do very well, and he was having a great season to start out. Looney doesn't really shoot the ball very well. He's finally taking shots, but he's not a very good shooter. So, we're going to be really hurting now. Wiseman's out 7 to 10 days and will be really evaluated with his wrist. So that hurts him more than anything else. It hurts the team, obviously, but it hurts him in the fact that he was having some good performances. He was getting some momentum. He was feeling more comfortable in the starting lineup. Coming off the bench was actually helpful. He even talked about being able to watch Looney and get a gauge for kind of how the game's playing out before he goes out there. That just goes to how little, you mentioned it, Ray, how little experience he has in the first place of just playing the game. He's only 19. He didn't get to play college ball hardly at all. Didn't have a summer league. Didn't have a training camp. There's a lot of things that a rookie of any age would have that he didn't have. And so, he's doing exactly what he should be doing, and hopefully this injury doesn't keep him out too long, and when he comes back, he can get some more reps. And, I think that's one of the rough things about this season is that, if they want to make the playoffs and do something in the playoffs, he's going to have to be a big part of that, and that's a lot of expectation for a kid his age and with his lack of experience.
Absolutely, it is. Now, that leads me to another question. Is there, in terms of we're talking about help and what they're going to need if they can make a playoff run, here's the big question, Candlestick Will. Is there a trade to be made somewhere? Is there the Bradley Beals of the world? I wanted back, but then his stock has definitely dropped a lot in the recent years due to his injuries. I wanted Victor Oladipo when he was at his peak. I thought he would have been a wonderful addition to this Warriors squad. And now with Clay being out this season, that actually looks like it would have made a lot more sense now than before when it looked like Clay was going to be back. Is there a trade to be made somewhere with this Warriors? And do you think the Warriors go in on a trade before the deadline?
Well, the rumors that had come out about the Pelicans offering up J.J. Redick to teams and possibly Lonzo Ball, and then making a phone call to the Warriors just to gauge kind of their interest. They didn't really talk even players, but then obviously the whole Twitter's verse went in on Oubre for Ball and who would you rather have. And then with Bradley Beal and the way he was acting in the first half the other night, in what was one of the craziest games I've ever seen, with the way they came back against the Nets, he clearly is unhappy in Washington and has every right to be. It's a flustercluck of a situation in Washington. So he wants out, it's clear. And we have the pieces to go after Bradley Beal. We have the pieces to go after Lonzo Ball. Oubre's $14 million expiring contract is always a tradable piece, especially for a kid that young. He's not a great fit here. He's better off the bench than he is as a starter, just in general, no matter who he's playing for, because his type of game where he's not really a 3-and-D guy, he's not a great three-point shooter, he's not a great defender, but because he is so active and he's so willing to put the work in, he's a guy who can get hot off the bench. He's a guy who's at least going to bring energy off the floor. And then no matter who he's guarding, he's willing to guard them. And sometimes that's a huge part of the NBA, is just guys being willing to play defense. But he's just not as good a shooter as Damian Lee or Kent Bazemore. He's not as good as the defender as either one of those guys. So he's just not as good a fit for what they need, especially in crunch time. And so he's a guy that obviously can be moved, and his money helps them to make a move. Now, if you want Bradley Beal, you're going to have to either give up Andrew Wiggins, which I don't think Washington would even want. As much as Wiggins is playing phenomenal, if Washington trades Beal, I'm assuming they'd want to start over, which means they'd start with Wiseman. And if you send Wiseman and Oubre with first-round picks, you can fill in with, Pascal, or if they want Pascal or Jordan Poole or whoever, Kevon Looney, and you can make a trade work. Now, are you willing to give up Wiseman and next year's first-round pick and maybe the Minnesota pick that could be top 3 or could be top 4? Do you give up all of that just because Bradley Beal's a 30-point scorer and he would be phenomenal? Or do you say, no, you know what, we're going to double down. Wiseman is going to be a freak of nature in a couple of years, and we don't want to sacrifice our future just for someone even as good as Bradley Beal. I'm of the notion that there's only so many prime years of a player's career. We've already lost 2 years of Clay's career because of injuries. Steph's basically lost 2 years of his career with injuries over the course of his career. There's only so many guaranteed games that Steph and Clay are going to have in their prime. And whether or not Clay's back at full strength next year or not, this year is definitely Steph Curry's prime. So going for it, I would be okay with them doing that. I also understand them not going for it and deciding to stay with Wiseman. But I would say that if they called up, especially because Bradley Beal wants out, we saw this with James Harden, the price goes down, right? LeVert was basically the only player of any kind that left, to get Harden. So we could move just Wiseman and Oubre, and that would probably be enough. But if we do that, then how many first-round picks do they want, and are we willing to give up more than just, one or two? Because Wiseman's already a first-round pick, so you can make the case that Wiseman, Oubre, and our own first-round pick might be plenty to get Beal. So it depends on what Washington wants, if they're actually going to pull the trigger, because it's, like I said, it's such a poor-run organization. They might keep him and just let him be miserable. So I don't know. If you want to get someone like Alonzo Ball or Thaddeus Young or go get Andre Iguodala back or somebody else that fits what Oubre makes, those are better fits for what we need out of that position and what we need out of that as far as production. If we don't do that, there's always going out using the trade or the injury exemption that we got from Clay that's up to $9 million. Guys like Lou Williams, PJ Tucker, and a few others are Derrick Rose is another one. Those all fit that because you have to be in the last year of your contract and it has to be less than $9 million. So those are players that we might look to get. Houston's not winning anytime soon with the current group they have. They might be willing to trade PJ Tucker. Would we have to give up picks plus to get him? Is that worth it? He's getting up there in age. Him and Draymond together might be great or it might be terrible. Tucker's a much better shooter than Draymond, but they kind of play the same position. They're kind of better suited to be, small ball fives. So on the floor together, I don't know if that's a perfect fit. I love PJ Tucker's game and effort and hustle. I don't know if he's a great fit. Lou Williams coming off the bench would be guaranteed points. I don't know if you necessarily need that. Derrick Rose, obviously another great backup point guard, but I don't know if you want to improve your team in that specific spot when you still need help on defense. You still need help, with length. Those two guys won't provide that. So I don't know if they're going to do those things. If you go out and you get Bradley Beal and PJ Tucker and you throw all your first round picks at Houston and Washington and you say, let's go, that's a pretty good team. Now, do they win it all? I don't know, because I don't know if that actually gets them ahead of the Lakers, the Jazz, the Clippers, the Nuggets right now, since they won't have Clay, they won't have Chris, and who knows what else happens. So I don't know if that's enough to win this year. So if that's not enough to win this year, do you sacrifice a bunch of first round picks for Tucker, who would then be a free agent, and Beal, who wouldn't, so you'd be able to keep him? And I think the idea of getting Beal without losing Wiggins and having a starting five next year of Steph, Beal, Wiggins, Draymond, and whoever, Looney, Chris, whoever, is pretty lethal. But what if any bench do you have? And I think we've seen with the Brooklyn Nets the last several games that having such a top-heavy roster doesn't guarantee wins.
No, it doesn't, and it didn't guarantee us a championship back in 2019 against Toronto, right? So we've seen. Well,
and that was with injuries too, right? Because because we lacked depth, it made it where once we lost Cousins and Durant and Klay Thompson, now we're out of it. Which any team loses three starters, they're very likely to lose. But we didn't have the bench that we had in years past.
Yeah, that's for sure. Raymond, here's a question for you. Kind of piggybacking off everything Candlestick Will said, what do you think is the most important direction here for the Warriors? Do they invest in the future, which is essentially keeping Wiseman, keeping this core, and trying to just, take this through the season in terms of its development? Or do they invest in winning now, which is making some sort of big splash trade like for a Bradley Beal and then seeing what lands and what kind of run they can make this year and next year in the post? What do you think? What is your opinion is the best direction for the Warriors moving forward?
Well, personally, I think you work with what you've got and prepare for Clay to come back into the mix. What they do is, I don't know. It's anyone's guess. I don't necessarily see the Bradley Beal coming over. I mean, I could maybe see, I've heard about Ball potentially coming to the Warriors, but, I don't know. He obviously would be backing up. He'd be a backup. But, and he's not, and he's really kind of, he's going through the Alex Smith in the NBA, where he's multiple teams, multiple coaches, multiple regimes. So it's really hard for him to kind of tap into his potential with all of the changes that he goes through on an annual basis in his career. So it would be, I think the Warrior system would be a good fit for him. Whether they bring him in, I don't know. We know that we have the room for him, obviously, and we want to make us the backup for Curry right now. And he's obviously Nico Mannion, our other draft pick. He's going to go to the G League because he's not getting any playing time. He's not out dueling Wanamaker for that position. So I think, that's there's room to do that. I just don't know if they make a big splash. I would see them getting, a better role player, someone who can be more consistent than Oubre's been, even though Oubre's been more consistent as of late. But even if they don't do that, I feel like there's enough there that they could potentially, you can get some. You're gonna get a good. You're gonna have a quality season with this group now. You're just not going to make a deep run into the playoffs with this group. I mean, basketball is very linear in terms of how you predict, the winners, whereas football can go either way, no matter what seed. So I think with the NBA, it's we'll have to see if they want to stick with this group obviously I think deep down they all want to win. Curry wants to win. So, if they're willing to part with some of these role players to, sacrifice a little bit of depth and perhaps some draft capital to get a tried and true player in there that they think could give them a chance at a title run, I think they would do that. I just don't think that any of those maneuvers involves giving up Wiseman.
Yeah, the Wiseman piece is tough because I think when you're looking at it from the Warriors brass perspective, right? Obviously, as Candlestick Will had already mentioned, that we are in the prime years of Steph Curry, and we've lost years with Curry and Clay, right? So we're in this really delicate position where we know we still have Curry. We can't bank 100% that Clay is going to come back and be ready to go. I mean, KD looked pretty good when he came back, but that's by far the exception, not necessarily the rule. We've seen plenty of guys come back from those same exact injuries and not look the same and be definitely missing a step. So now we've got 2 years of Clay gone and injuries to each of his legs. Like to each of his legs, he's had ACL and Achilles, right? Devastating injuries, 1-1. We don't know what kind of Clay we're getting back. And so I think the Warriors are in this really delicate position where they're trying to figure out, I think if they keep Wiseman, they are preparing for the future. They still, while winning now and being successful is obviously really important to this franchise based on the track record we've already seen in the past decade, but also kind of keeping one foot in the direction of what comes after this eventual run with Curry and Clay is of importance to them. And I think if we keep Wiseman, that tells us that the organization has at least one eye looking towards that future. All right. This is my final question for both of you guys, and then we're going to wrap it up today. I want to hear from each of you. Candlestick, we're going to start with you. If we keep Wiseman and we keep the team as is, what is your prediction for our final place in the West?
Well, I think based on our record right now and the way the teams are playing, I don't see us getting any higher than a 5th seed no matter what, because the top 4 teams are playing like top 4 teams. That being said, when we get to the playoffs, one of the things we saw in the bubble last year was, Devin Booker just putting the Suns on his back and going undefeated. Then Damian Lillard putting his team on his back and basically by himself. McCollum was okay, but Lillard was on another level and took the Trailblazers to the playoffs. Then we saw with both Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray, them just completely single-handedly lead the Jazz and the Nuggets through rounds of the playoffs where the Nuggets end up in the Western Conference Finals. Steph Curry is better than all 4 of those guys, by far. So no matter what the rest of the Warriors look like, if we get to the playoffs, whether it's a 5 seed, an 8 seed, whatever, we have a chance to do something when we get there. Now, if we have a 7 or an 8 seed, or even a 6 seed, and we have to face the Jazz, Clippers, or Lakers in the first round, we might be out in the first round. Those are better teams right now. They have way more depth, they have way more balance, and they've played together longer. So there's a very likely chance that those 3 teams could beat us in the first round if we don't get a 5 seed. If we get a 5 seed and we get some momentum in the playoffs, Curry in the playoffs has shown that he goes 5-6 games all the time. He wins on the road all the time, even in 2013 against the Nuggets and Spurs, even in 2014 against the Clippers. So you just give him a playoff series and he's going to make the most of it. And so with that, we have a chance to go deep in the playoffs because we have one of the best players in the world. And as long as Steph Curry is healthy, we have a great chance to do damage in the playoffs. Now, actually getting out of the West and getting to the finals would be him playing an absolutely nuclear level because we just don't have the depth. So I could see as high as a 5 seed to get into the playoffs, but if we get to that 5 seed, we could very well get 2-3 rounds into the West.
Nice. That would be amazing. Raymond, what is your thoughts? If we keep the team as currently constructed, where do you see this team landing in its final standings in the West?
Similar to Candlestick Will, I'd say 5 is the best case scenario, but probably realistically between a 6 and a 7. I think we're definitely better than, I don't think we can be I don't think we'll end up at the bottom. I think it's somewhere between a 6 or a 7. Even at the beginning of the season, I thought that this team was only good enough for, bottom seeding. But now that we're a quarter of the way through, I'd say 5th at best, 7th at worst.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that is it for our quarter season review. We'll be back, obviously, later in the week. There's obviously big news down south. The LA Rams have traded for Matt Stafford. That means we're going to have a conversation with Louis B about this big move. I've already been teasing him incessantly about this, so that should be a good episode. But all right, folks, let us know what you think about the Warriors quarter season. How do you feel so far? Do you think making a trade with Wiseman is wise? You see what I did there? Or do you think, if you think that the team is currently constructed, what will their final place in the standings be? Let us know in the comments. Go to youtube.com/thegoldcast and let us know what you think. And so concludes another edition of the Goldcast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy3 and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis first.
And our esteemed co-hosts,
Candlestick Will.
Boom! We'll see you next time. Same Goldcast time, same Goldcast channel.